everyone, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the Better the Pond Pondcast, where we talk to amazing people doing incredible things that lead the charge of generosity. My name is Warren Berry, and I'm your host and the founder of Instinctive Solutions, where we believe that everyone is an odd duck, but that's what makes them awesome. Today, our guest is David Graham. Here's the question: who wouldn't want to change the life of a child? David was once asked the question, why are you doing what you're doing? This question, combined with his experiences of going to camp as a child, put him on his path to where he is now, the CEO of Brigadoon Village in Halifax, Nova Scotia. David is incredibly passionate about kids, community, growth, and empowering kids to be themselves and take risks so that they can go out and create ripples in the world. If you want to listen to someone who is doing something world-class to better the pond, stick around and have a listen to David Graham. All the way from Halifax, Nova Scotia, I am so happy to have you, David Graham, on our Better the Pond podcast. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Well, I'm ready. I'm happy to be on the pond.
Fantastic. Before we jump into all the questions, David, can you just kind of give me an overview or a synopsis of, what you're doing at Brigadoon Village out in Halifax?
Sure. Brigadoon Village was the vision of our founder, Dave McKeag. Dave passed away 3 years ago, but during his lifetime, Dave was a three-time cancer survivor. He got involved with the Canadian Cancer Society's Camp Good Times as a teen, and went as a counselor, and then became their camp director, and saw the power of the camp community experience for children living with or beyond cancer. And it germinated an idea in his head around the fact that in Atlantic Canada and other parts of Canada, there were children who had various health conditions or other challenges in their life that didn't get this kind of access to this community that was built by a camp experience. And so he started, with this idea, and as he started his professional life, he started to pitch it to people. Got some people really interested in it in the early 2000s. Started to fundraise to build it in about 2009, 2010. They thought it would take about 5 years to fundraise the money to build the facility. It took 2. Because of the support of the community, and they built the facility. We opened in 2011 with 38 kids in a Crohn's and colitis program. In 2019, we had just shy of 800 children attend our summer program in 15 different camp programs, and each camp program is committed to a very specific group of kids. I mentioned, our Crohn's and colitis program. We have with Canadian Cancer Society, we run their Camp Good Time now. We have arthritis, epilepsy, blind and visual impairments, deaf and hard of hearing. We have a bereavement program for children who've lost a loved one. We have a wonderful program we do with the Mental Health Foundation here in Nova Scotia, where we operate a camp program for children living in a home where someone's been diagnosed with a mental illness. So we teach them the coping skills that they get. And so what comes out of Brigadoon is, for these kids that have these diagnoses in their lives, we really we form that community that I mentioned earlier, where they can come and they can meet kids who are just like them or have had very similar experiences, often for the first time in their lives. If you're a child from a small village in Cape Breton with epilepsy, you're probably the only kid in that village with epilepsy. But when you roll into Brigadoon, you come to a place where there's 50 or 60 other people with epilepsy, and it's the first time in their lives these kids have heard I know what you're talking about there. So immediately this community forms, and the kids start to learn more about themselves. And what we do at Brigadoon through the program we're trying to deliver is we're trying to show these kids that they're not limited in their potential. They're not limited in what they can do. And they're not limited in the questions they can ask as they move from being in that pediatric care environment into the adult care environment. And it's a powerful experience for them.
That's fascinating. As you were speaking, David, is what came into my mind was the power of an idea, right?
Oh, yeah.
The founder had an idea. I mean, he had his experience and then he had an idea, right? And then you look now as what's actually come out of that idea, like the impact that has occurred, the impact on all the children and the families that has come out of a single idea. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's remarkable. I mean, in less than 10 years, the number of kids we serve in the summer at our facility, we're the largest program of its kind in the country in less than a decade, by a significant margin. And so that idea, really attached itself to a broad unmet need, and we're still only scratching the surface on it. We know that. And that's, we're going through a significant expansion of our facility right now to try and meet some of that need. But even as we do that, we know we're not going to cover 100% of the need that's out there.
Mm-hmm. But it sure is something great to strive towards.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Every day.
I love it. I love what you're doing. And, when we get into some of the questions too, I want you to, we'll kind of unpack some of those things of, what does the future look like? And where do you want to see this go? And, how can people help? And we'll definitely unpack some of that. So let's, so thank you for the synopsis. I love it. So let's jump right into the Pondcast here, David. So we're going to make this a little, a bit about you and your backstory. And then we'll bring it up to speed to today. So David, what I want to know is what got you from being a Gosling, and I'm taking, like, we're going way back. We talked a little bit earlier about being in Ontario. So you're a Gosling, you're the beginning of your life, to leaving the nest. So when you had to start, when mom and dad kind of kicked you out, or you decided to leave the nest, right?
Yeah.
To where you are today. So David Graham, what is your backstory?
Well, I grew up in I grew up on a farm in southwestern Ontario. When I think I was about 9 years old, a friend of mine's mom came to me and said, "Would you be interested in going to camp with Brian?" And I hadn't ever even given the thought of camp. I don't even know if it had even crossed my bow as far as what an experience camp would be. And so I did. I said, yes, I'm sure. Let's try something new. I've always been willing to do that. So I went to camp for the first time when I was about 9. I use the example with our staff now, but I can remember to this day my very first camp counselor. I know what he looked like. I know, where he was from. And one of my most vivid memories is he always wore a Styx, the rock band Styx t-shirt, but he was very impactful for me in my experience, just because he was the coolest guy on the planet to me as a 9-year-old at the time. And so that started my life in camp. I went for about a decade and worked my way up through the camp program I started at, and became, the program director in my last year of high school. I'm trying to think if it was in high school or university, but I think it was high school. I was became the program director at it, and then I left camp. As I started into university, I came out to Nova Scotia, to St. FX, to go to university. And university needs and my financial situation at the time dictated I need to make a little bit more money. So in the summer, did other things. But I really missed that camp and that community experience. And then I graduated university, never thinking summer camp.
So I'm going to cut you off there for a second, David. Sorry, but
Yeah.
I'm intrigued. So I'm going to take you back just a little bit.
Sure.
Okay. So basically you grew up on a farm in southwestern Ontario. So your parents were farmers. Was it in agriculture or what?
Yeah, actually it was my we had a 1 acre, we lived in the farmhouse and owned the property that the farmhouse sat on. My grandparents actually owned the farm itself, and my uncle was the farmer. So but I mean, growing up on a farm, you drive the tractors, you get to do it. We were a cash crop farm, so we didn't really have too many animals. Although, once we did have some steer and the occasional horse, but yeah, so that was.
So did your dad work for his brother? Is that?
No, my dad was in the clothing business. He ran a clothing store in town where we lived, and and so his background wasn't in farm. He grew up on a farm in New Brunswick, but once he left New Brunswick, he wasn't terribly interested in that side of things anymore. But he really enjoyed the retail side of things, and that's where he was. But
So was he more of an entrepreneur then, would you say? Was it his own
yeah,
business?
he struck out on his own when we were. I was just going into high school, I think, and he struck out on his own and went from the place he was running into a place of his own, and so and built that business up a little bit. And unfortunately, we had some rough economic times, and so did the store, and so it ended up having to close. But but my dad was very much I would characterize very much as an entrepreneur. He's gone on to run 2 or 3 different businesses since, and still, he's in his 80s, and still has a business that he loves doing out in Vancouver. So.
Oh, wow. So now going back into your, you said your high school years and going to camp and becoming a camp counselor and those kind of things, looking back, could you ever see yourself as being the CEO of Brigadoon way back then?
No. I think, I grew up in in my family where we lived on a farm. My family was also very much involved in a number of industries. My grandfather was very much an entrepreneur, started several companies that grew into very large companies. And I always envisioned that I would move into heavy industry, really. My grandfather and some partners founded a company that developed the Timberjack skidder, which is a lumber equipment that hauls trees out of the forest, and now it's much more than that. But they founded that firm. It's now owned by John Deere. He also had another couple of companies that were into building cable pulling systems and for mines and for hydro and that stuff. So I always kind of figured I would end up down that track. It was so no, but camp taught me, though, how to be myself. It taught me how to be taught me leadership ability that I took into high school, and used in student council and used in sports. And it gave me the confidence to do that too. When I was a kid.
And so I was going to bring you a little bit up to speed too on when you went to university. That was the time where you left the nest, as it were, I would assume. And what did you go into university for? What did you take?
I went into business at St. FX, and people often ask me how I ended up at St. FX with many, growing up in Ontario and many of my family from New Brunswick. I was always kind of asked, well, why not Mount Allison? You got family history there, or UNB or something to that effect. And at the time, St. FX had a business program that you could go right into, using Western, which is closest to where I grew up in Ontario. You didn't go right into business school. You did 2 years of undergraduate work and then applied to the business school. And right. Even back then, I wanted efficiency. I wanted to go right into what I wanted to do. So,
David, some things never change.
So, but it was the best decision I ever made in my life. It was St. FX it was a tremendous experience, and it actually built on that camp kind of experience in that it was a very small community. We all lived and breathed and died everything together at St. FX, as a student body. And my closest friends today are my closest friends from there. And people out here, sometimes refer to St. FX as a little bit of a cult, but it is because you're in a small town with a very small number of people, and everybody experiences the same thing through the, or a very small difference of iteration of the same thing through the course of that experience. And it's again, it's about community. Real community forms in the university, like camp, where you look back and I look at the 4 years that I spent at St. FX, and they were the best 4 years that I invested in myself in my life. It was remarkable.
Wow. We had talked earlier, and I was saying when I was out in Halifax here just in December last year, of how I just fell in love with it. And we had talked a little bit earlier, just how it's a community, and you sort of said the same thing. So you're what I'm hearing from you is like back in university it was that way. It's all about community. We lived and died and breathed together, right? And that whole culture has just weaved itself through, right, that whole region, which I think is just amazing. And I was saying to you earlier is just how I felt it. Like I got off the plane and I said, laughing, people were friendly in the airport. But you walk off the plane, you get in the airport, and that's exactly how you feel. Which really astounded me. I was actually moved by it.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty universal out here. It is quite remarkable. And as someone who's had different drop-in experiences in Nova Scotia, and now it's a permanent drop-in. We're here, but as I mentioned before, I mean, people call us a come from away, and that's how they'd refer to you as well. But as I said to you, I let people know that I'm a choose to be here, and I choose to be here because I see that community that really has formed here. And and it's not just restricted to people who are from here or have a long history here. When you get here, whether you're from Ontario like me, or Syria, or wherever, I mean, people see that people will rally around and support people if they need them. And people know that if you're needed, you rally to help whomever it is. And, a great example of that, side of things too, would be the family that founded Peace by Chocolate. It's a growing national firm now, but it was founded in Antigonish, where St. FX is, as a matter of fact, by a Syrian refugee family. And people rallied around to help them get up and running and started. And they're certainly very good business people as well. But just a remarkable example of people that the Nova Scotia community stepped up to help them get here and get established, and then they made the most of it, and are now have national profile. The community aspect of the Maritimes can't be denied.
And when you're saying that, when people come in, they rally around and support, which is really powerful. But to me, that's the same thing that you're doing with Brigadoon, right? Yeah. The child comes in and everyone rallies around and supports.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's we get I spoke to it's interesting, and it doesn't just stop at the campers too. I mean, I spoke to a parent of a staff member of ours a few months ago, and they said they were talking about the transformational shift that their child who was a staff member with us had in their perspective of the power of camp when they experienced it with us. And we've seen it through the 10 years of operation. We've seen staff who have come in and worked with us who have completely shifted what they were going to do with their university career and their life. I mean, going from, wanting to, go through perhaps that, like me, a business degree or something to that effect or whatever. But if, I know of one in particular who shifted, wanted to go into medical school now because they wanted to be able to help, and they wanted to do something different. And, and we attract for our, from a summer staff's perspective, we attract people who want to be doctors and nurses and physiotherapists and recreational therapists and all those, service, community service based careers, because, they want to help these kids, but they also know what we're doing and want to attach themselves to it.
Mm-hmm. And why? Yeah, and why wouldn't they? Right? Like, yeah. It's very attractive. So I'm going to bring us a little bit more up to speed. So so there you are living on the farmhouse. You leave the nest. You head out to the East Coast. You go to business school. And so bring me up to speed from there, David. What has got you from walking out of the doors? You've got diploma in hand.
Yeah.
Where you are today.
Well, my wife and I always laugh because we walked out of school into a fairly severe recession, and there weren't a lot of jobs. We had thought about staying out here. I met my wife at St. Halifax. We kind of knew as we were graduating, we were going to probably, commit to a longer term relationship together. We walked out into a recession. We moved to Ottawa for about a year. Just kind of bounced around a little bit, trying to land on our feet for work. I worked a little bit in the political arena at the time, mainly volunteering, trying to do that stuff that gets you in with doing things further. But really felt we couldn't make a go of it in Ottawa at the time, and so. I mean, I was selling insurance, trying to make money there. I wasn't very good at it because I really, at the time, for me, I need to be passionate about what I'm doing. I couldn't generate passion from trying to sell someone term life insurance, and then we moved back to my hometown for a couple of years as well. And then I don't even know who it was, but I was actually selling. I went from selling insurance to selling photocopiers, and I was less inspired by that than I was by the insurance.
Photocopiers are inspiring.
Yeah, now that, I mean, listen, there are people out there that love doing that stuff and the technology and all that stuff, and I don't slight them at all for it. But for me, it just wasn't me. But we were out at a social event somewhere, and there were a bunch of kids there. And I ended up playing with the kids and doing stuff with the kids. And someone came up to me, and I can't even recall who it was, but they said to me, "Why are you doing what you're doing right now? Because you should be doing something with kids, whether it's a teacher or something to that effect." But, they pretty much said to me, I know what you're doing now, and you're not doing what you should be doing. And that really nudged me into looking into, well, what could I do with kids? And I looked into going back to teachers college because I had a business degree. The credits weren't really transferable for teachers college, so I would have had to pick up some university credits. And my wife and I at that time had a young family, so it was really not financially possible. And then I picked up the phone one day, and I just called the Ontario Camps Association, which is sort of the accreditation organization for summer camps in Ontario. And I said, I got on the phone and essentially said, "I don't know if this is a thing or not, but is there full-time jobs in summer camp?" And they're like, "Well, of course there is." And I was like, "Well, are there any jobs open?" And they said, "Well, yeah." They sent me a list of jobs that were open. And I applied for one, and I ended up getting hired on by a gentleman. His name was Skip Connett. He just passed away actually about a month ago. But Skip hired me on because he liked the fact that I had a business degree, and because he was trying to build his business. of this summer camp. And he liked the fact that I'd gone to camp as a kid. And he thought if he combined the business degree with the summer camp experience, it could create some magic for what we did for his business. And so I worked for him for a couple of years, and then ended up moving on to the Easter Seal Society for a year. And then they downsized. So unfortunately, I was downsized, but I ended up at a summer camp, private summer camp called Candelore in Ontario for the next 15 years. And again, it was the owners of that program were looking for someone to build the business out from what it was. And I took on that organization and grew it pretty dramatically, and loved doing what I was doing there. But it just came a time where I felt that, I felt that perhaps I'd reached the top of that arc. And again, once again, it just came down to, I looked at my wife one day and said, what about Nova Scotia? What about going back there now? And what about looking into opportunity? And she was like, well, you're crazy, but we joked a couple of years ago. I said to her, what was funny? I never, my wife, Ann, I said, I never really had a midlife crisis. I never bought that Porsche or did anything like that. And she goes, are you kidding me? You packed your whole family up and moved them to Nova Scotia on a whim. And I was like, well, okay, there was that. But,
there's that. That was your red convertible.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. That, so maybe I did. But anyways, I ended up, the opportunity at Brigadoon was there. I'd known the board chair from Brigadoon through some camp and other connections for a few years. Anyways, I just reached out to her because she was in executive search. And I said, my wife and I are kind of thinking that we'd love to move to the Maritimes if possible. So if there's anything, let me know. And a few months later, she got back to me and said, were you serious? Because as you know, I chair Brigadoon, and unfortunately, Dave McKeag is sick, and we need someone to come in and operationalize the place, and because it had just been built. So here I am.
Here you are.
9 and a bit years later.
Yeah, the Grand Poobah, Brigadoon. That is fantastic. I love it. That is a fantastic story, David. And and just sort of reflecting when you were talking, and see if this rings true for you, is here you were at a conference and you end up playing with the kids, and somebody walks up to you and says, why are you doing what you're doing, right? And would it be fair to say that the opportunity found you rather than you went looking for the opportunity?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's a very good way to characterize it, Warren. Because at the time, I would say I was just very much focused on trying to support my family and trying to earn a living, and in a traditional sense, in what I had envisioned would be natural, but the economic times at the time, and just my, like I said, I just wasn't finding something that I was passionate about, were really challenging me to be successful in things, and that nudge was definitely that was a pivotal moment. It was an inflection point for sure for me.
Yeah. So it found you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, which could lead me into my next question for you, because I think this kind of really ties you led into the perfect segue. David, I believe that we're all odd ducks. I believe that we're all misfits. Now, can you tell me about a time in your life when you didn't fit in, when you were the odd duck? And it can be a positive or negative, or what did you do differently to stand out? And I always ask the question, what makes you awesome? And I'm not going to come at this from an egotistical standpoint, right? But what is it that again, positive or negative, that made you stand up, or something you did differently?
Yeah. I always say, my wife and I kind of have a running joke whenever she just kind of rolls her eyes at something I'm doing. And I'm like, listen, you married weird. You knew that going in. So
see, we're all on ducks.
Yeah. I think what happened, for me, I don't know that I can think of any particular moment, because, I've always been, as a teenager, certainly, you go through that time and phase where you're very self-conscious, and you're very, and I might have retreated a little bit into myself in that, but I had enough people in my life who said, no, be you, be the real you. Don't try and be something else for people. And really, shine who you are. And I've always, I guess I would say, I've always taken a unique perspective to things. I've always wanted to, status quo and me don't get along very well. Let's just put it that way.
Yes,
I've always challenged the norm in, and not in an aggressive way most of the time, but I just always been willing to go off on my own and do something, and try it out. And, even just using that moment of me choosing to go to St. X, leave home and go halfway across the country to go to school was not something that I think, from my mother's standpoint, I don't think she ever thought I would leave home and be that far away.
Mm-hmm.
But I was just like, yeah, no, it's an adventure. I'm going to go try something new. I mean, I've got that kind of adventure spirit. People look at me and think I'm crazy because one of the things I love to do is literally I'll get some folks together and go get lost on a river for a couple of weeks at a time. I've traveled from Labrador City to the St. Lawrence twice. I've traveled from the middle of Quebec into James Bay once with some of my old team from Candelore when I was there. But there's nothing I like doing more than that, and because of just the serenity that comes with being out in the wilderness and being on river, and again, going back to something I've hit on before, that community that you get with, that shared experience you have with a very small group of people, is a pretty remarkable thing. And 2 weeks ago, I got a text I haven't really spoken to a bunch of the guys that I went on my last trip on the Moisey River with in 2012 very often since I moved out of Nova Scotia, but one of them just shot a text around to all of us a couple of weeks ago with a picture from that trip, just as a little bit of a reminder. And it reminds you how impactful those experiences are for everybody on them.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm weird that way. I'm weird that I'm weird that if you dare me to do something, I'm unlikely to say no.
Yeah, that's right. That's one thing I know about you, David. If I was to say to you to get you moving, if I said, I bet you can't.
Yeah.
So that's all I'd need.
I had a guy, we do a fundraiser for Brigadoon. Well, not we do. We have an organization that does a fundraiser for Brigadoon. It's called the Big Swim. And for years, what they would do is they'd swim the bridge from New Brunswick to Prince Edward Island. And so it's, as the crow flies, it's a 13-kilometer bridge. But the swim itself can range anywhere from about 15 to 25, 22 or 23 kilometers because of currents. And the guy who founded the Give to Live, which is the organization that does the swim, essentially dared me to do it in 2015. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. And he's like, well, okay, if you don't want to do it, that's fine. I just thought you were up to it. And I was like, you can't say that, because now, of course, I have to do
it. I have to.
So I did.
But well, exactly. But can you see that weird? And I like the word weird. I use the word weird in a positive way, right? In a positive fashion. But can you see how you being weird, or you seeing things from a different angle, or always looking for opportunity or thinking differently, and how that has enhanced Brigadoon?
Oh, absolutely. I think, and in anything I've done, I love the mistakes I've made in trying new things, because I've always taken the opportunity to learn from them. And I say that to our team, as we onboard a new member of our team and they get a chance to sit down and talk with me, I will say that every time to people: don't be afraid to make mistakes. A, you're trying something new, and B, you'll learn if you do make a mistake. And I said, the only rule that goes in here is never make the same mistake twice, because then that shows you haven't learned.
Right.
So, it's yeah, I mean, it'd be boring if you weren't experimenting.
I call it fail forward.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I don't want to fail up, though. I'd like to build on success up, but I'm willing to fail forward. I think that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, fail forward, make a mistake, right? Move forward, make a mistake, move forward. You just keep failing forward, right? Because you're always trying new things. You're always on.
And I think and that really goes to the heart of what we're trying to do at Brigadoon too. Is that as a culture, and we've grown very risk averse, especially for our children. When it comes to them stepping out of their comfort zone or taking those little risks, to try something new. I mean, we're always afraid, and I'm using this collectively more than individually, but collectively as a culture, we're often afraid that our kids will get hurt or damaged in some way. But, at some point in our history, somebody had to decide to get on a boat and come to a new country, or a plane, or however they got here, and they took a big risk to do so. And yet we don't want our kids to even take the smallest of risks. And at Brigadoon, we encourage kids to take risks, because especially kids that have got these diagnoses, they've been so often just naturally protected because of their diagnosis, that they've very rarely been able to take that little step forward. But listen, you take the little risk, you take your little step forward. Many times you'll have great success. Sometimes you'll make a little mistake, but then you take that mistake and you learn from it, and you take a new risk and go forward. Risk has to be defined differently than recklessness. Right.
I agree.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's okay for a kid to fall down and hurt their knee because they were probably chasing after somebody to have fun, to play tag.
Right.
Or twist their ankle or whatever. It's, that's fine.
Yep.
We just built a new high ropes challenge course at Brigadoon that looks risky, but it's perceived risk on it. And the growth that we'll see in the kids that will participate in that activity is going to be tremendous because they will take a step out into thin air to try and move from one element to another, forgetting that they're double attached to wires and could never fall further than about a foot. But they take that risk, and all of a sudden they're rewarded with success. And these are the things we're trying to teach these kids.
Well, we never grow in our comfort zone.
You don't grow in your comfort zone. No. We go through an exercise with kids, and we talk about and I'm going to massacre this a little bit because our operations team is so wonderful at saying it. But in essence, the beginning of camp, they'll often go through an exercise where they talk about their comfort zone. And then they talk about stepping outside your comfort zone. And then they talk about it. I forget the words now, but it's like the panic zone. And what we talk to the kids about is we want you to step outside your comfort zone, but we don't want you to enter your panic zone. Right. We want you to experiment and try that next circle of things where you're doing new things and you're testing out limits. And but if you get into the panic zone, take a step back. We want you back in that second circle. So it's and I think it's a great analogy for what we're trying to do through the program that we set up for the kids.
Nice. I love it. All right, on to my next question here for you, David. And I think you alluded to this earlier, but I'm not going to pin you to it. But can you tell me about a time when someone did something for you that left an impact on your life, that left that mark? What's the first thing that comes to mind?
Oh gosh, I mean, it's immeasurable. I've mentioned a few of them already about people sort of nudging me in certain directions and nudging me in the other, but as well, I mean, there was the first one that sort of comes that I haven't mentioned yet would be a university professor I had, and in an industrial relations course that I took. And we're all thinking we're hotshot business students in this course, and it was a relatively small class. And he would always pose a question at the beginning of class and look for responses. And then, and being business students who like point form answers to everything, we would give our very brief answers about why we what position we were taking on something. But what he would do inevitably is he would then come back and he would challenge you. And he would say, why do you say that? Why is that your position? Why are you setting your feet there? And he would force you to show the layers of the onion, I guess, so to speak, and really get into, really be able to defend the position you were taking, and show people in the room why you were staking it there. Oftentimes, especially early on in the semester of that class, you'd get knocked off your position because you had really no basis for establishing it. Right, like you're just saying something for saying it, and so that and so from my perspective, that was the powerful nature of that challenge. So many professors, not so many, there were professors who would just stand up at the front of the room and lecture and sort of go through the information they wanted to pass on, and you'd write it down, and then they examine you on it at the end of the semester. But Clive Gilson was his name. Clive would challenge you on everything. And but he knew he was making you critically analyze why you had that position. And so, as from a critical thought leap, that sticks with me very much, in that, I've become less likely. I'm not going to say I never do it, because I still do, but I've become less likely to just stake a position without any foundation of thinking underneath it.
Mm. Can you think of was there a moment in time, was there one thing that maybe he challenged you on that may come to mind that just really flipped your thinking? Is there anything that comes to mind with that?
Well, I mean, just, even just the standpoint of, do unions have a place in the workplace? Because this course was sort of based on that foundation of collective bargaining and all that kind of stuff,
right?
And as a typical business student, we would there was more than a majority of us in that room that probably would say no out of the gate. And I was one of them, and I mean, that's the one that stands out for me. I said at the time, I said no, I don't believe they do. Now I had worked in a union environment, and so I had a little bit of experience in it, and I would say, it wasn't, the union perhaps in that organization wasn't the best example of what a union can do. But so I was coming from that foundation, but I just kind of just put out there, no, I don't think so. And then of course he dove in with why, and just boom, boom, boom. And I gave my personal experience a little bit of it, but he said, you're speaking from a narrow band of information. Let's examine this more broadly, that's what it was, his jumping off point for then, let's look at, what are some of the potential benefits, and then let's have this discussion again.
Right.
And it's not necessarily that he was pro-union or pro-management in what he was trying to do, but he was definitely trying to make us present a more well-rounded perspective on it. And and certainly that opened my eyes to at least think about it more.
Right. Yeah. Opens up your thinking, right, to looking at a lot more possibility than just one narrow frame of mind.
Yeah. And I would say, again, in today's culture, we're missing a lot of that, right? Like, I think we're missing that opportunity to see what the other person's perspective is on something. It's, so much polarization these days that you're either here or here, and you're not willing to look to the other side. And if we can't, then we're in a lot more trouble longer term than I think we realize. I think, we have, it's compromise isn't a dirty word. A lot of people these days think it is.
Right.
And so, I really do try and, dig into other perspectives, that are different from my own. I don't, I can read all I want about people who believe in the same things I do, but that's pretty boring.
Pretty easy to agree.
Reading stuff and engaging in conversations with people who don't believe the same things I do is much more fascinating, and my group of friends, here in Halifax, one of the, we'll often get into really vigorous arguments about stuff because we're not all the same. And one of my friend's wife said to us one day, "Why are you guys always yelling at one another?" And it's just like, well, we're not yelling at one another. We're debating the points, and no one comes out of it with hard feelings. We're just vigorously talking about the ideas in which that we're discussing at the time. And I think that's something we need to find more space to do today.
It's interesting you say that because it goes back. You reminded me actually when I first met you in our Tech Canada session. We'll give Tech Canada a big of a shout out, and Joe Gillivan in your chair, who is amazing. No, but one of the things that we had talked about, remember, is talking about like how about flying in a V formation, right? That was sort of the metaphor I was using, and I had used sort of yourself as an example, or Brigadoon as an example of flying in a V, where everyone is chipping in, trying to get to the same point, right? But what you just said was really kind of encapsulated it really well. Was we have all these different opinions, and we have different values, and we have different knowledge, and we have different perspectives, right? But together, right, we get a better outcome.
Absolutely. Yeah, to not have debate is as bad as not willing to listen. Right. And we need to listen to one another. We need to talk to one another. We need to hear what other people are saying, and we need to be willing to say, what, they might have a point. I say that to my leadership team often. I said, I'm telling you where I stand right now, but that doesn't mean I'll be standing here at the end of our conversation and our discussion about what we're trying to accomplish. So don't feel like I'm dictating something right now. I'm putting this out here to start our discussion. From here, let's dive in and let's poke at it and see what's gonna, where the benefit is.
Mm-hmm. And that, in my opinion, is great leadership.
Thanks.
So kudos for being the lead goose right there. All right, so let's sort of bring it up to date. And we talked about this earlier, but I want you to kind of show. This is your opportunity to kind of showcase Brigadoon, and the question in the whole Pondcast, right, is about bettering the pond. So what are you doing right now to better the pond, to make the world a better place? So that's my question, and I want you to showcase what all Brigadoon is doing. And my other question goes back to your prof, is why are you doing it?
Yeah. So, what we're doing at Brigadoon is really, not only are we at the individual level, transforming kids' lives and changing their perspectives about themselves, but in a macro sense, we're changing the future of our region. In that, and we're not old enough yet to have all the hard data, but we're getting there and are starting to assemble it. But we know anecdotally at Brigadoon that the kids that experience Brigadoon are more likely to go on to post-secondary education. We know that they're going to be more likely to be active contributors to society because they've become empowered. And know that there are very less limits to them than maybe in thought coming into their experience at Brigadoon. And we know in the healthcare system that by empowering these kids and teaching them more about themselves, and as they learn more about their condition, we're reducing their impact on the healthcare system in the longer term, especially as they move into adult care. One of the big gaps in our healthcare system is that transition, where kids will disappear out of the system as they leave pediatric care, where a lot of things have been handed to them and they've been helped out a lot, and then all of a sudden they're told they need to assume responsibility for themselves. We're giving them we're filling that space where they know they can assume that responsibility, rather than disappear out of the system and appear 10 years later with more acute needs. So we know we're changing the future of our region that way, in so many ways. In that we're generating more kids that are going to do more with their lives than they ever would have thought possible at the end of the day.
One of the things I was thinking about, David, and I'm not sure if you guys have collected any data or research points on this, but when someone has an illness, now whether that's going to be an autoimmune disease or something that's more acute or chronic, that I believe that the emotional state of someone, right, and the physical state is in alignment. That's what I believe. And so when I think about Brigadoon, right, and you had led to it earlier, saying that, when a child comes in, let's say with, you mentioned epilepsy, let's just say that from a small town, and they come into Brigadoon, right? So in the small town or the area that they're in, they're alone, right? No one really understands them. Their relationships with their physician or whatever the case may be. They come to Brigadoon, and all of a sudden there's 20 kids who are just like them and saying, yeah, I understand what you mean. I get it. And right. And then all of a sudden they get this support. So their emotional state changes dramatically.
Yeah.
Right. And with that emotional state changing dramatically while they're at Brigadoon and being understood and appreciated and supported, does that in turn, right, change their physical health?
Absolutely, because the number one comorbidity of children with the diagnosis that are coming to Brigadoon is anxiety and depression. That's the number one thing that's attached to these kids because of all that they have to go through with their diagnosis. So, as a therapeutic element, people don't realize that one of the largest pieces of what we do at Brigadoon is mental health, because of how we're shifting the perspective of these kids about themselves. So very much their physical and mental state is aligned, but we really work so diligently at showing them that they're not that kid with epilepsy or that kid with cancer, right? No, they are Warren or they are David, and they have endless opportunity and potential ahead of them. And that's what we're doing with them. And so I'll use an example of a story of how fast it happens, and then as well what we got back from a parent. A number of years ago, I was at an opening day of camp, and it was for our Carpe Diem, or not a Carpe Diem, that's our epilepsy program, our Brave Heart program, which is for children who've had heart surgery. Anyways, the parents had all just left, and I was walking into the main field, and a soccer game was going on with all the boys in the program. And it was chaos. They were just, there's teams, they're going everywhere. No one knew, we didn't have pennies or anything like that, so no one knew who was on what team. And then they stopped for a second, and one of the kids said, hey, why don't we go shirts and skins? And the kids were like, oh yeah, okay. And so they divided up in two teams, one shirt, one skin. And that's in less than an hour of camp. Kids who had never in their life dream of taking their shirt off in gym class did it at Brigadoon, because they all had the same scar. So there were no questions. Everybody knew, right? Like it was just like, oh no, let's just we're playing a game. We don't need to stop and point and go, what happened there? Right. It just happened. And that so I mean, from an impact standpoint, less than an hour. Wow. We changed these kids' perspective about themselves, right? And then, the other story I like to talk about and reference quite a bit is we got a call from a mom after her daughter had been at her Crohn's and colitis camp. And Crohn's and colitis, they are embarrassing for kids because they always need a bathroom nearby. Right. They always, it's very, and it's just not fun stuff to talk about for kids. But this mom called us and said, I don't know who this kid is that you sent home to me, because my daughter came home from camp and she wants to take dance lessons now. And it's just like, and she's like, do you realize the risk she's taking by doing that? But she's willing to do it. She'll put on the leotard. She'll go to dance class now because you've shown her that she can. And so, those moments will lead to longer term impacts and longer term changes in what these kids are going to do.
Uh, you know, you just remind me of sort of going back to sort of my metaphor of, you know, the ripple effect, right? So, you know, you throw one pebble in the pond and all the ripples go out. And that's really really encapsulates that whole concept, right? That one child who didn't think they could, right, now thinks that they can. And
Yeah.
I'm sure they will do the same for someone else.
Absolutely, they'll pay it forward. Yeah,
They'll pay it
absolutely,
forward.
they'll pay it forward. And you know, and the exciting thing for Brigadoon going forward too is that, you know, we're starting to have visions of doing what we do here in Atlantic, Canada. We're now starting to think about, well, what are the opportunities in the rest of the country? You know, our model works really well. We have a very powerful outcome. You know, are there other places in Canada that we could take Brigadoon to and put in place and have this kind of impact on kids in Saskatchewan, in, you know, British Columbia or Western Canada or whatever, regionally or provincially. And we're starting to lay out the thinking of how could we do that? How can we do that? You know, it's you know, and using our, you know, our little engine that could, and you know, rural Nova Scotia with Brigadoon, and laying the tracks across the country, you know, with the, you know, because we certainly see them, we certainly see a great model of operation in what we're doing, and we're learning every day about how we can do it better. But we're also learning that, you know, we're also learning that there are other places in the country that perhaps we can do it in.
Yeah, fantastic. And I'm gonna come back into that with what you just said. My next question for you, David, goes back to why? Why are you doing what you're doing?
Oh gosh. Me personally, or Brigadoon as an organization?
But
I think
you're the head.
I think they're pretty well aligned because
I would suspect that as well.
you know, it's but you know, I mean, gosh, what, who wouldn't love to know that they're changing a kid's life? You know, it's you know, it's a remarkable thing to see. And at Brigadoon, we see it live and in action. And in, you know, it is occurring in front of our eyes. And it's a remarkable thing to witness. And you know, in longer term, you know, who doesn't want to know that they've left the world a better place? And you know, it's you know, with these kids, and we're now getting into the thousands that we've served at Brigadoon. You know, and you go into your ripple effect. Who know, you know, we're knowing that these kids are going to ripple effect, change the world for the better.
That's powerful. That's
Yeah.
that's powerful stuff.
Yeah.
So David, now looking back and looking forward, and the lessons that you've kind of learned along the way and along your journey, you know, what does the future look like for you? What does the future look like for Brigadoon?
Well, as I said earlier, in you know, in our chat, you know, we're currently involved in a significant expansion of our facility. We're investing about $11 million right now in expanding it and building in a number of pieces that'll help us to better deliver our outcomes that we talked about. Like that high ropes course is something we've just built, but we're doing a number of different elements that will help us to accomplish that as well. So, you know, from that perspective, we're looking forward to serving a much larger clientele group here in Atlantic, Canada. You know, our next step, you know, our next baby step to some degree beyond that is we'd really like to get into community programming where we bring Brigadoon home per se to different communities around the region, including getting a facility in Halifax that we can call our own, where we can do where we can bring kids, you know, from this area together on a regular basis and do some fun camp-like activities in it, and really have a, you know, a camp in the city facility is kind of what we're envisioning next. And then that gives us the leap out to finding other places in the country that we can do it. And you know, there are organizations I don't even want to say similar. There are other organizations who are doing kind of the same thing as Brigadoon, but no one's doing it in the scale or scope of what we're doing it. And I think that's the exciting part of it, is that we can bring the scale and scope of what we're accomplishing out to other areas of the country.
So, geez, it's funny, interesting that you're at the helm when you're doing things differently. Isn't that interesting, David?
Yeah, I know.
Kind of goes back to being weird again, doesn't it?
Yeah, I get, like I was saying that, we talked about Joe Gillivan in our tech group earlier, but I had a meeting with Joe yesterday, and I'm coming up on my 10-year anniversary at Brigadoon, and I said, Joe, I get bored easily. And I can tell you, I have yet to find a day where I've been bored at Brigadoon. There's always something in front of us that's nudging us along, and always a new challenge there. And I don't foresee getting bored. In the near or long-term future at Brigadoon. We've got a lot, and we're creating some of that excitement ourselves, that'll keep us from getting bored. But if I get bored, I shut down.
Absolutely. And I think, but to me, for yourself and talking about Brigadoon and just you personally at the helm, right? Like you found your secret sauce.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
You found your secret sauce.
Yeah.
And
it came from that conversation almost 30 years ago, where someone said to me, you know what, you should really be working with kids.
It's funny how that all comes back around, doesn't it?
Yeah.
All right. So my last question of the day here for you, David, is, and you don't have this one, by the way, if you were standing on a mountain,
yeah,
and the whole world was intently listening to you,
yeah,
what would you say?
No. I would say do everything you can to lift each other up. It's that would be my message. It's a lot of people try too hard to beat other people down, but let's look at it from the reverse perspective. We were involved in an exercise here with 3 other charities earlier this fall, and our little tagline that we attached to it in working together was, "A rising tide floats all boats." And it's I think we need to collectively realize that we need to lift each other up.
All right, so I'm going to go one more time, because my audience is intently listening.
All right.
Let them know. Tell them what you just said.
I lift each other up.
There you go.
Lift each other up.
Lift each other up. There you go. They're intently listening.
Yeah.
All right. So, David, I really, truly want to thank you for our time today. I want to thank you so much for your stories. I want to thank you for everything that you're doing at Brigadoon, because again, you're really the epitome of why I created the Pondcast to begin with. You're also the epitome of the ripple effect that you're having, and you and your team and the people around you, right, are making the world a better place. And to me, that's really, really remarkable. So, in saying that, where can we go to find you? Where can we go to find Brigadoon? And also, how can people either help support, donate, connect with, and help you do what you're doing? Because really, I believe that we're all in it together.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. The easiest place would certainly be our website, brigadoonvillage.org. If people have, our website provides opportunities to learn more about our programs, to learn if you wanted to get involved, if you wanted to donate, all those sorts of things. We have donors from across the country who support what we do, literally from BC to St. John's. So, it's we would love to be able to talk to people about what we're doing, and people get involved with us, and not only to volunteer but to donate with us, because it speaks to them, and so we're happy to speak to them, to talk about how Brigadoon speaks to them, because we're not just changing Nova Scotia, we're not just changing Atlantic Canada. We know that this impact goes well beyond that, and so our website is the place, and all our contact info on there, and I'm always happy to talk about Brigadoon with anybody who would want me to, so they can reach directly out to me if they'd like.
Perfect. And are you on social media as well?
I am. You can generally find me at most of my handles on most of the places are Campy Dave.
Campy Dave.
Campy Dave. Now, you get a lot of pictures of my dogs and my family, but occasionally in there, I might sprinkle some stuff about Brigadoon and the summer camp experience.
And so that's where you spread your weird, right? You get to share that.
Yeah. You get the whole gamut if you hit me up on social media. Although I will say, I guess my Twitter is generally speaking more Brigadoon focused.
Oh, okay. And one of the things that I found interesting, talk about donating, was something that I probably had never thought of when I looked on your website, was like even donating Aeroplan miles.
Yep, you can donate. Right? Yeah, we do have an Aeroplan program. So
yeah,
and that gets kids. We have kids come in from Newfoundland, and often we're having to incur the extra cost of flying them. And we've had kids from Ontario and Quebec as well, within our program, as long as they weren't displacing a maritime kid. But we're flying them in for those programs. And so, the Aeroplan program that we have offsets the cost of the flights.
Right. So something as simple as that, right? If you've got points, just donate your points. So instead of, if you don't have the cash, then there's an alternative way to be able to support what you're doing and the kids and create ripples.
You're creating ripples. Yeah. That's what people are investing in if they're supporting Brigadoon.
Excellent. All right, so there you have it, folks. We had a great time with David Graham and his work at Brigadoon Village. This is a fantastic conversation. I love it. So this is Warren Barry, and I'm flocking off to take you beyond the pond to better the pond, because we're better together. Thank you so much, David.
Thank you.